Hello, my name is Dan Gibson, and this is another video in the series Archaeology and Islam. In this short video, we are going to look at the old congregational mosque in the town of Yamama in Saudi Arabia. The town of Yamama is well known to Muslims. A major battle took place there in December 632 AD, or during the 11th year after the founding of Islam. At that time, a number of tribes rebelled against the newly formed Islamic State in Medina. One side of this particular battle was the army of Abu Bakr, the first caliph of Islam. On the other side was the army of the self-proclaimed prophet known as Musaylama. The name Yamama is related to wild pigeons which were common in the area. The town of Yamama is surrounded by sand and rock and small agricultural villages. The region has date palms and some fields for wheat and flocks of sheep and goats and camels. It was also a source of clay for making bricks. Some of those bricks were transported all the way to Medina to build mosques there. Today, Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia and is in the Yamama district. The Battle of Yamama was won by the Muslims at a cost of over 10,000 lives, but it extended the Muslim control all the way to Bahrain and Oman. However, some 360 Hufiz memorizers of the Quran died in the fighting. Because of the loss of so many men who had memorized the Quran, the Caliph Abu Bakr ordered the writing of the Quran. At this point, only bits and pieces of the Quran existed on papyrus, or palm stalks, or bones and other writing surfaces. These were all collected, and every verse was written down. The guideline was that at least 2 surviving memorizers of the Quran had to know the verse. Our interest, however, is in the archaeological excavation that took place in the old town of Yamama, particularly the old congregational mosque. In 1945, a French colonel reported the presence of archaeological remains in the area, and a few years later Philby completed a description of several oases. In 1978, a comprehensive archaeological survey of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was carried out in the central part of Arabia, and it identified 16 sites at the oasis alone, confirming the potential of the area. Consequently, in the late 1980s and in the 2000s, Al-Ghazi started excavations at several sites in the oasis. In 2012, surveys were made of surface finds and excavations began on the old Yamama Congregational Mosque by the joint Saudi-French mission. For many years, the old town of Yamama was covered over with sand. So first, the excavators had to clear away layers of sand that had blown in over time. Beneath the sand, the early mosque was revealed. The earliest Rashidun mosques were typically small structures, and many were just open-air areas. As time progressed, it became popular to roof over one end of the open-air mosque so that the faithful could pray in the shade and also in protection from rain. The Yamama Mosque clearly shows one end of the mosque had columns and roofing. The qibla wall can be clearly identified, first by the columns and second by several small mihrabs in the qibla wall. What I find most interesting about this mosque is that none of the reports that I read mentioned the qibla direction. I'm sure they were all puzzled by the qibla wall, as it faces northwest, not southwest. Either the mosque builders didn't know where Mecca was, or perhaps there was something in the north that they faced towards rather than Mecca. As I worked on the Qibla database, the Yamama Mosque fit right into the data. It was an early mosque, but it had a Qibla facing between Petra and Mecca, which places it in the years of Hajjaj, who was governor. and he was dictating the qibla direction of the mosques that were built in his area. Notice in this illustration that the Wasit qibla was the first between qibla. The Wasit mosque was built by Hajjaj and was a pattern for the mosques that followed, at least for those in the area where he was governor. And so the qibla direction of the Yamama Mosque is no surprise. Now, think carefully about this mosque. Some years ago, some scholars claimed that my findings were just variations of qiblas that all faced south. Notice the majority of qiblas are north of Mecca. Therefore, they would dismiss my findings. The mosque builders, they said, just faced their mosques south. They didn't need to measure very carefully. However, these scholars said that if a mosque was found north of Mecca, facing north, then that would change everything. And so the mosque in Yamama challenges the traditional view that all mosques face Mecca. This mosque faces north, and it faces the same direction as 60 other mosques, which all face a spot in northern Arabia between Petra and Mecca. Dr. Peter Haramo studied these 60 mosques, and using advanced mathematical algorithms, and in his 2022 paper titled Rate Distortion Theory for Descriptive Statistics, he was able to accurately determine the exact spot that these qiblas were facing. This was the mysterious Raufa temple, found standing alone in the middle of northern Saudi Arabia. While little is known of this Nabatean temple, it seems to be the place that Hajjaj chose to face his mosques towards. Or perhaps it was just a coincidence that there was a temple in this location. Whatever the case, the Congregational Mosque in Yamama faces away from Mecca towards the north, and it fits into the same pattern as some 60 other mosques that were used at this time and that used that qibla direction between Petra and Mecca. If you're interested in learning more about the qibla direction of early mosques, please download a free PDF copy of Let the Stone Speak from nabatea.net. That's the website. You can see it at the bottom. I'm sure you will find it interesting. I'm Dan Gibson, and this has been another video in the series Archaeology and Islam.